Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Off the Top Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm obviously the fastest archaeologist in the world and becoming probably the most attractive at this point.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate claim.
But let me hop on really fast because I'm going to take the steering wheel. Let's talk about books today.
Okay. Do you have any books on the top of your mind?
Yeah, so a few books. The reason that I kind of want to jump on this is because I've been kind of in this zone of like reading a lot more and kind of garnering a lot more knowledge. One of the books that I just finished about a couple days ago was Assault on Lake Casitas about Brad Lewis. For all of you guys who are rowers, I'm sure you recognize that name. Brad Lewis was the gold Olympic medalist in the double sculls in 1984. And he was the first guy to win it with his partner, I think, Paul Inquist. For 25 years, the U.S. hadn't won a gold medal.
So how did you find this book?
Good question, man. It was late at night, and I was just kind of perusing the internet, obviously, as everyone does. And I just kind of got on to just searching around for extraordinary people. Like, either if they're extraordinary and, they're extraordinarily smart, skilled, talented, or hardworking. And then I just kind of eventually stumbled on this book about Brad Lewis. And this guy is literally, like, the way he describes it, he's just hell-bent on, getting the Olympic gold. And at first he was convinced that he was going to do it one way, and then it didn't work out that way, and then a whole bunch of stuff happened. And so I won't ruin the story of the book, but dude, really good book.
Is it like a autobiography, or is it
I would say it's more, probably a little bit of an autobiographical piece. But at the same time, I feel like it's more like, he narrates, and he's, it doesn't seem as like strict and forward, and it's a very small time frame of this guy's life. Mm-hmm. So
what are some of the skill sets or some things he like mentioned in there that you kind of picked up on or thought were unique or interesting?
Good point. Yeah, there's a few things I highlighted in the book, and one of those was just kind of there's a few lines in the book where you can feel almost through the words like his unrelenting will and his, at all costs types of thing. A few things that really stood out at the beginning when he was at the Olympic trials in the very beginning of the book. He had his trainer with him, and his trainer and him have like a few things that they do. One is like they have like this like almost primitive chant, and they like yell it before, like as he pushes off and stuff. And then another one too, and this I think kind of paints the picture a little bit. At the very beginning of the book, his trainer, before he takes off, he's like, "It's a good day to die." And so I think like when I read that, and granted it seems like out of context, it seems like a very strange thing to say to somebody who's about to row a boat. Mm-hmm. But I think it kind of illustrates the mindset of this Brad Lewis, and the fact that, at all costs, he's going to, tear his body apart before he submits, in the task of winning gold medal.
I find it interesting, the different mindsets of people or work ethics, and how that develops, or what the backstory between, some of those people with a killer instinct and some of those who are just like, will do as much as they can in their own comfort zone to win, but aren't going to exceed that. So it would be very interesting to see if he defines that, or, what makes that go across that boundary for him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what was the burning will, or like, what pushed him? And a lot of it, I mean, he talks about it kind of briefly, but some of it I think is definitely just deep down, like anger and cantankerous. Somebody who's filled with piss and vinegar is is a common saying of just somebody who's just, like, I don't know how to describe it, but they're feisty and they'll put up a fight type thing.
Yeah, I wonder too. I think it takes a certain person to have this certain deep anger and channel it for personal success and not channel it for like a negative road or path where a lot of people can go down that with their anger ways. Like nobody cares about me, or like I'm doing me. Like to channel that into something to make you a world-class athlete and one of probably the strongest people in the world. Like rowers aren't weak at all. So channeling that to a positive path to push you to, a gold medal, and also use that, or I guess communicate with your partner without being like an overt asshole or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, especially with the double sculls, like it's different than, like an 8-man rowing team or a 4-man, it's like very intimate. And I think, through the whole story illustrated, like, how close he had to be to his partner. And there's times when, his partner and him were definitely not vibing, and like he could tell. And so he had to that was as equally as important as, are we doing our workout regimens and stuff like that.
Yeah. What do you, and in terms of reading, right? You said you picked it up recently or got really back into kind of reading heavy as of recently. What do you see in the importance of reading?
Really good point. The importance of reading, I think, is in the aspect of you're getting introduced to new ideas. And I think that that's very important in a lot of aspects of life, just to be introduced to new ideas that you haven't thought of and kind of take you out of your comfort zone. And another thing that I really enjoy about reading is that you get to, it's almost like a reprieve from life. And in the fact that, there's a movie, and like once you get really into a movie, like it's just the movie, you're not really distracted by outside things. And I think books do that as well, in a kind of more pure aspect, in the fact that you mentally are taking yourself there. So you're painting every picture, as you're reading, let's say you're reading The Assault on Lake Casitas, and, you're imagining this guy, and at like the break of dawn, breaking into this place and rowing and, at this like placid lake and stuff like that. So it's, I think, very beneficial for your imagination and, just your thought process of your brain. Personally, Julian, are you a big reader?
I don't read a lot of traditional text, so I don't read a lot of like physical books or ebooks. Or necessarily listen to audiobooks. I do try to read at least like 1 to 3 times a week, like a New Yorker article or like a reputable blog on, marketing or advertising, or maybe an in-depth interview or something along those lines, just to get, keep the, like you said, the thought process moving and kind of learning some outside ideas or what I would do in X and Y scenario. I don't think I read as much traditional books just because of time. Like being in college, you do a lot of reading on like subject material. So like finding that time, at least for me personally in my current schedule, is really hard to find a book and then continue with it. So I just try to read a lot of short articles, not so much like stuff I find on social media, but I'll probably just Google top 10 marketing people of all time or something like that, and then find out some people I might be interested in and see if they've done an interview or like a short excerpt or, an award write-up on them, and just kind of see what their background and path is and see what influenced certain aspects of their career, and go from there.
Gotcha. So when you kind of seek out those elite people, let's go with your marketing example that you use. Are you specifically looking for something that they've done, or like, are you just paying attention to their childhood and upbringing, or, like, is there anything that you specifically want to know about them when you're reading about them?
I wouldn't say there's anything in particular that I'm searching for. An example would be, after Childish Gambino released like his recent song, I looked into like who directed it and who like Gambino works with, and I came across like his creative director. and just listened to like a podcast and read an interview with him, and then saw some other pieces he did, and just kind of saw like his backstory and just saw, the route he took. Like he went to this school and did this, and then, this influence happened here, and like seeing how he took different parts of his life to implement into his work or his lifestyle, or like the obstacles he overcame, etc. Just seeing where, some things take. I'm just more of an interest reader, I guess, seeing like, wow, that's really interesting that, he's from Nigeria and he brings this influence into the American market, and, people really enjoy it. Just kind of seeing, the general interest of that life story.
Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, is Childish Gambino from Nigeria?
Not Gambino, but his creative director is from Nigeria.
Oh, gotcha.
And travels back and forth, but has a lot of him and Donald are very, I guess, close and similar minded, which is also something interesting to read, like how the mindsets of people are. You can just kind of tell by the way they, answer to interview questions, or some of the metaphors they use, etc. Kind of very cool to look at once you start figuring out what you're looking for.
Yeah, totally. So I know that you said that you don't read a lot of traditional, like, books, Moby Dick or, whatever, Huckleberry Finn. But if you were to give somebody a curriculum on, let's say you wanted them to know about marketing, what books would you put together for them, or reading would you put together for them so that they can like get up to speed, so to speak?
I don't know if there's necessarily one. I haven't read enough actual marketing books as much as interviews or just like keynotes. I do believe like what Phil Knight did with Shoe Dog was pretty cool. Just basically told about the rise of Nike, how he didn't believe in marketing, and then how some things in marketing, helped and changed. I mean, there's probably a lot of different books out there, but I think a lot of them also have to do with like psychology, almost like how your brain works, or how you read an audience or understand a user, or a consumer. That's probably something that helps a lot in marketing, or like maybe some more strategic books, figuring out a strategy or learning how others use strategies or what their strategies were. And even if it's not related to marketing, it could be anything like starting a business, the strategy to get to the NBA or whatever it is, kind of finding how they define their goals and objectives and rolling with that.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. And out of curiosity, if you could put that together for me, I'd enjoy it. Because obviously I'm not a marketing guy, but it always seems like one of those aspects where, you know about marketing, you also know a little bit about X, Y, or Z as well.
Mm-hmm. What do you think people lose when they don't actively read?
I think they lose, I think what they gain is like an insulatory type of thinking, and the fact that, you kind of lose interest for anything that's different than yourself. And naturally, I think people kind of lean towards that just because change is such a, sometimes a very painful thing. At the same time being very, essential and good. But I think that, once you stop introducing yourself to different ideas, and granted, just reading, if you just stopped reading, you would obviously have a lot lower vocabulary, or the tighter vocabulary. You might not be able to read as fast, obviously, if you don't read. And, but mainly just kind of having that like island mentality of, oh, whatever's on my island is what I care about, and everything else isn't even existing, or I have no interest in it.
I think there's this interesting relationship in today's generation where a lot of people are on social media platforms, and you're necessarily reading, but I wouldn't say you're reading credible content or very informative content. But at the same time, you can also read, like, be informed by, following CNN or Fox News or whatever you follow, and they post their little excerpts or headlines on, president of company says blank because blank. It gives you general overview of how to be informed. But I think too, in that sense, you lose a lot because you're kind of just reading headlines and you're not looking further into the article. Maybe it's debunking that or something. So like you're informed, but you could be misinformed. And I think the nice thing about traditional books or traditional media, is that you have the ability you have the whole story and you've bought it or purchased it for a reason to get that whole story. And someone found it, credible enough to invest in it and publish it. So, it's going to be a quality piece of work instead of sometimes you catch like fake news articles, which obviously are going to misinform you in some sort of way.
Yeah, definitely. And to talk about that, I think that it's very important to get information from more than one source. So diversify your information pools. And the reason why is because, if you just were a very specific, like let's say that you only read the Washington Post, then you would basically be, a puppet of theirs, because all the information you're getting and all the ideas that that you are being a conduit to are from them. And let's say that they wanted to take a stance on, and granted, I know that media and especially news articles and stuff, like when they report, they have some sort of sense of duty when it comes to being, very bipartisan and not too, one way or the other. Sometimes that's not the case, but I think that, that's the true underlying principle. Nobody wants to be misleading with what they're saying unless, and the 90 or the 1% that do, then, you just got to deal with it. But I think that's important to, get different media or, information streams so that you can make a better understanding and, decision yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good point of having different sources for your media or your facts or your news. And I also think in the same respect too, even if you want to be something that you don't think has any books out there or any information, I think there's still a lot of, information to gather. Like say you wanted to be a rapper or, this new genre of rapping or whatever it was, there's still, I think, a lot of information that you can get from, different sources. But like you said, if you're just getting your information from the one kid on SoundCloud that's had one song and he did an interview saying like, oh yeah, I barely work, I just got really lucky or something like that, and you think it's all luck, then you're missing out a portion that if maybe Jay-Z comes out and says like this SoundCloud generation is doing well because they really know how to market themselves or they know their audience or something like that, you miss out on a key step to get to that goal or objective.
Gotcha. And I really like that you kind of like put it in a present mindset with that. So now I'm curious, it kind of led me to this thought. What do you think today's books are? Because back in the day, I think books were very highly sought after. And in some cases, way back in the day, people thought that books would rot your brain because you wouldn't be using your imagination. Somebody else would be giving you imagination, so to speak. So now what do you think that is today?
I think that generationally different. I think books are still pretty heavy as you get older and you kind of get away from trendy social media. Not saying you're off it, but I still think as you get older, just finding that traditional book is a little bit nicer because, like you said, it is released. But I think in terms of younger generations, a lot of it is podcasts or like YouTube interviews or YouTube content. There's a lot of YouTube content out there, but there's a lot of people that do very well or very informative. So if like you look at, I don't know, we'll say Peter McKinnon or MKBHD, someone we both watch, they do a very good job of, 10 to 12 minute videos being very informative on, what their background is or like how they got there and certain, so maybe they're describing a phone or how to do a certain camera shot or something. They're like, okay, when I was younger, like I didn't know this existed. I was doing this and it didn't work out. And I transitioned to do this and my work ethic got me here, which is very similar storyline to books where like when I was younger, I, was riding bikes all the time. And then as I got older, I realized that like to be in better shape, I started rowing or something along those lines where you still get that story or that background information, but and the younger generation, that visual help of seeing it, I think helps a lot. Yeah.
Do you think a attention span of this, our generation and the coming generations have led to, a difference in taste as far as, where they want to consume their information?
Yeah, 100%. I think our attention span is a lot shorter. I mean, in my perspective, you can see it from, ads you watch. So you look at ads like iPhone 10 ad right now, or iPhone 8 for the red one is just literally like loud music, lots of changing colors and angles. And it's like not really describing the phone, but it catches the eye of a younger generation. As you look at Apple's ads in like 1980, 1990 or wherever, where they did like, I think it's 1974 or 1954, whatever. They did an ad based on like a book where everyone was following a certain thing. And it was like there's a lot of message to it. And it was like pretty simple. But as you see this evolution, all ads are kind of changing to that, just like really loud, trying to catch your attention because we have like a phone. We can skip ads. We can use DVR, just go to Netflix or whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, you're totally right. The reason I asked is because, I mean, like you said, you mentioned videos, and I think videos are a great way to get information in a very quick way because first off, you have the visual aspect of it, you have the audio aspect of it, and also, it can be you can learn a lot of information within, like you said, a 10 to 12 minute video or even less.
Yeah. And I think another one we've kind of glossed over is if you can find an appropriate community on the internet, it doesn't have to even be local. Like if you look at Reddit and you get into a subthread that is knowledgeable or has people of knowledge, just that ability to talk to someone in, Europe or Australia from the United States, throughout the course of a day is extremely helpful as, our generations before us couldn't do that.
Yeah, you're totally right. Just kind of sharing of ideas as well as kind of an information stream and, learning from it. Yeah. And I mean, some aspects that's probably one of the better ones you can have is kind of this, corroboration of, this is what I learned from my experiences and like, what I've been through. And, that's this, you have certain ones as well. And so when you push those together, you kind of have somebody who isn't, two people who aren't, let's say, between 20 and 30. And so, but you almost have somebody who has like, 60 years worth of experience.
Mm-hmm. I think it's, in my opinion, it's fair to say that there's no, like, you don't have to read books. You don't have to watch YouTube videos, but I feel like it's important finding a way to get your content or stay informed. I mean, it's going to change all the time. I mean, if you look at the evolution from what movies are back in the day to like what the options you have on Netflix for documentaries or just like, fun entertainment films, it's the same root of books, like fiction, nonfiction. That's what you have on Netflix or whatever. So I think it's just important finding those ways where you like to get information and kind of staying consistent on, consistently getting updated on information.
Yeah. Being consistent with your diet as far as, like with anything in the world, it's way more powerful and potent if, you take daily tasks and like, they don't have to be big, but you take a daily steps and what you want to do with something. Like, let's say I want to compare it to working out, you can assume that the guy who, spends about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes a day or every other day in the weight room is gonna, for let's say a month, is gonna look a lot better than the guy who spends 3 hours every 3 weeks in the weight room,
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing that's important when you are building this repetition or reading or what it may be is that like relating it to yourself, I think is very important. Like I know a lot of times when I read, I put my personal opinion or myself in those shoes. Like what would I have done? Like would I have backed down? Would I have gone this route? Would I have thought of, why didn't I just do this or why? And it's obviously very different, but putting yourself in that critical thinking too, because it's going to give you a lot more ideas besides what the text is just laying out for you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the part of the imagination to kind of extract as much information as you can out of a book.
Last question. While reading books, is there anything that you really like to read or any certain genre or style or just finding, certain quotes or...
Yeah, I'm a big 50 Shades guy. No, I'm just joking. but that's on my list to read one of those books, just because how salacious and, sultry everyone's made them out to be. I'm kind of curious. So I want to read that for myself and have my own idea and opinion of it. But as far as what I naturally tend to read, I read a lot of like skill-based books and not, a lot of, this person did this and like that's how they got such a good skill, or, skill building stuff, and not as much, your tales and things of that nature, just because I enjoy using and taking practical things and building blocks from the things I read and applying them in my own life. And granted, you can learn a lot from like one of the books, Moby Dick. Like you can learn a lot from Moby Dick, but at the same time, you can also learn a lot from, a book that lays out how to properly, build a motorcycle or, maintain a motorcycle. And so things like that are usually what I lean towards. Mm-hmm. How about yourself? It sounds similar.
I don't know. I like stories. I just like seeing how it's built and character developments. But I think I can find that in any book I read. Like every book you read has a story. It's going to be a little bit different. Even if it's how to build a motorcycle, they're going to have, their dilemma. Like maybe my engine is sounding weird or something like that. And then they're going to figure out, okay, this is the problem. This is how I solved it. I put it back together. I really just like hearing the story. I also like hearing, the personal experiences. Whether it be on someone who's super successful or someone who just had, a small personal experience of a failed company or something, how they reacted, seeing that reaction and what triggered that, and maybe some of the ideas or how they looked at life at that part. Like, was it glass half full, half empty? Was the glass always full? Stuff along those lines.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. And I think we kind of laid over our surmise that, getting information is very important, regardless if it's from books, podcasts, which you should be getting your daily podcasts or weekly podcasts, or anything, but just make sure that it's a strong and steady diet with a diversified mix of things.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening.
Later.